And hello to everybody. I want to thank you for joining us for this Io-Tahoe webinar. My name is Steve Friedberg, and we are fortunate. I'm thrilled to have as a guest today a good friend and probably one of the people who knows more about more things than anybody else I've ever had the privilege of knowing. Pam Baker, how are you?
I'm fine.
That's fantastic. You may want to speak up just a little bit, but that's okay. Pam has written about just about every topic under the sun, and she is the author of Data Divination, Big Data Strategies, as well as you can see here, she has written for virtually every publication out there. She currently has a series of articles awaiting publication. Where is it, on PCMag.com?
Yes, there's reviews, various vendors of database as a service products, and that'll be out probably within the next week.
That's fantastic. And as you can see, she's also spoken to journalists around the world and has presented at the New York Academy of Sciences. So, Pam, it is an absolute joy to have you here, and I thank you very much for taking part. If you have any questions during the course of this, well, you're welcome. Folks, if you have any questions during the course of this webinar, please feel free to enter them into the chat box. We'll do our best to get to you. If you are watching this after the live event, you can ensure that this recording is available, as you well know, at io-tahoe.com/webinars. And the slide presentation will, in fact, be available for download there. And if you are so inclined, we'd love to have you tweeting about this live time or subsequently. Here are several accounts that you can go after: Io-Tahoe, Baker.com, which is yours, Pam, MMI.com, which is mine, and if you use the hashtag data discovery, that will be fantastic as well. We're going to talk about several topics during this next hour. We're going to start off with GDPR and big data in a GDPR world, and privacy, or if you're on the other side of the pond, privacy in a GDPR world and its worldwide presence. The role that data discovery can play in ensuring compliance, not only to GDPR, but a wide range of privacy regulations, both here in North America and around the world. And the role that machine learning can play. And finally, Pam and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about this, and a very interesting point came up that we've moved from the information age to the knowledge era. And Pam, I can't wait to hear you talk about that.
Okay.
Well, good. That sounds like an evil chuckle, so we'll take it from there.
It is an evil chuckle. You know, it's all fun and games until we miss the rails. But hey, okay.
I was going to say until somebody's data gets breached. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's start off with a real high level, if you will. We talk about big data, and we've been talking about big data for, well, more than several years now. From your perspective, what are companies getting right, and what are they getting wrong?
Well, you've got to keep in mind that the whole big data concept, even though that's maturing at a good clip, it's still, as a business concept, relatively new as far as getting your mind wrapped around it. And what I mean by that is that business people tend to look at it strictly as mining. You know, what's in there, hash it out, churn it out, tell me, you know, what we should do and where we stand. So a lot of the work to date has been in finding what we do know. We have all this information in data warehouses and different apps, and so businesses were more focused on learning what we do know. Now we're moving more towards discovering specific answers to specific business questions. So what are we getting right and what are we getting wrong? We're still struggling to discover the data we have. We're still struggling to find the finer points in what what we can use that information for. Um, and we're still struggling with privacy issues. We're still struggling a lot with these bigger issues. But what are we getting it right? We're asking the questions. What are we getting wrong? Our data is still pretty much a big mess, and we need to get it sorted out.
You've indicated when we were talking beforehand, you referred to an era of reckoning, that we've gone from the promise of big data to a much more, I don't even know what you want to call it, a much more granular approach, and people are getting called on the carpet for using big data in ways that other people say they should not be using it that way.
Absolutely, and it is a day of reckoning. That's why you have GDPR. That's why you have Facebook being called on the carpet in front of one country's legislators after another's. But make no mistake, most big companies, if not all of them, knew this was coming. And it was just a grab for information, get as much as they could to monetize it immediately. We'll worry about the devil and the details later, even though we know that's coming. And so here we are. And we're having to deal with that. Now, that's unfortunate. I mean, it's a typical business strategy to do as much as you can before the law catches up, because it's legal to do it right now. But just because something is not addressed by law yet doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Okay? And at some level, a lot of business people understand that. A lot of the data and information that they quickly gathered and wanted to use, they would not want gathered on them personally. So if you wouldn't want it, it's the golden rule. If you don't want it done to you, don't do it to others. But in the name of business, but also sometimes just accidentally trying to figure out what you can do with the technology and with the information. I don't mean to insinuate everybody's evil. Certainly they're not. But the point is, those actions, be they on purpose or by accident, are now being called into the light and judged. And most of us knew that day was coming, and now it's here.
Well, and with that in mind, as we've noted, that GDPR is probably more responsible for more people receiving more emails from more vendors than at any time in our past, certainly in a concentrated time frame. And it's, regardless of whether they're evil or not, to use your word, it becomes a case of the legislators and really the public becoming more savvy. Is that an accurate statement?
They're becoming more savvy. I would say in part after the passing of GDPR than prior. There is some savviness prior, of course. You wouldn't have the regulation to start with. But think of it this way. You just talked about all these emails we're getting. Do we have your permission to XYZ? And people are discovering that's a real handy way to clean out your email inbox. Okay? If you don't answer those emails, a lot of that email goes away. So I'm saying that's a simple way for people to understand that, no, it doesn't have to be like it's been. Things can change. Things can be different. I do have a say. They're kind of discovering their individual power all over again, and that will accelerate the call for regulation and the call for investigation and some of these occurrences we're seeing now.
With that in mind, though, the ongoing debate over what level of privacy that you should expect and who is entitled to it continues. It is not a new debate. I mean, back in 1999, Scott McNealy, who ran Sun Microsystems, was quoted as saying, "You have zero privacy anyway, get over it." And just a couple of weeks ago, a key analyst for Gartner said, "Please don't be stupid. Privacy is not a human right." But, well,
yeah.
but by contrast, Well, just today, Tim Cook over at Apple is quoted as saying, "We think privacy is a fundamental human right." So this is the angle we look at it, he said. Privacy from an American point of view is one of those key civil liberties that define what it is to be American. And that's a direct quote from Tim Cook.
And I would agree with Tim, but I would take it further. I would say it's a human right, not exclusively an American expectation, although an expectation of privacy also exists. But as far as it being uniquely American, no. Think of it this way. If you were to go into a public restroom anywhere in the world and stand up and look over the top of an occupied stall, you're probably going to get punched in the nose, okay, and rightfully so. Because there is an expectation of privacy, whether or not there's a law governing whether one can go into a public restroom and look over a stall. So it is a fundamental human right. It is a fundamental expectation. And what I mean by human right is it will be defended. If you look over that bathroom stall, you're going to be cursed out or slapped or punched or the cops called, or there will be some consequence to that. There will be a defense of that right to privacy. That's true if you try to put cameras in somebody's home and so forth. So yes, it is a provable, defendable human right. It is also an American expectation. It is also a European expectation.
Far more for Europeans, though, with the passage of the law than it might be for U.S.
Yeah, it's only when you get into countries with authoritarian rulers, I can't talk today, that there's not an expectation of privacy because that's not how those countries are run. But it is still a human right, even where that expectation does not exist. So to say, don't be stupid or get over it, that's ridiculous. That's companies' wishful thinking, trying to get by with things. Again, they wouldn't be happy about it if we're done with them. So it boils down to just do the right thing to start with, and life is easier.
So remind me not to go to lunch with you because I really don't want to see you peering over the edge at somebody else's menu. So we'll take it from there.
I won't even take a French fry from your plate. You know, I think it's
no, and thank you. You can have all my French fries, Pam.
Okay.
The question then becomes, and we've seen these emails come to us here in the States, even though we are in the States and not Europe. And you and I, again, have talked about this, and we've seen that to some degree, it may be easier for companies simply to say, we're going to adopt GDPR, even though we don't like it, rather than have a separate standard here, a separate standard there, and run the risk of violating any of the standards through some mistake or whatever. So the question does become, as you see on the screen, has GDPR become a de facto global standard?
The short answer, yes, it has. It's a matter of practicality. Once okay, keep in mind that GDPR is not a set of technologies or anything that somebody has to adopt. It's a set of rules, okay? So, and with enormous fines, I mean, if Facebook, for example, is found to be out of compliance, you're talking about the potential of $1 billion or more fine. That's a fine, dear. So,
indeed it is.
Yeah, so companies are gearing up to make sure that they're not hit with that. And so once you have those policies in place, it's just easier to just apply it to everybody, especially when the law itself follows the person, not the geography. And what I mean by that is if you have an employee, let's say you're a U.S. company and you have an employee from who was born in the European Union. They're a citizen of the European Union, but they live in the U.S. and they're working for a U.S. company. Well, GDPR now affects what that American employer, that United States employer, handles that employee's data, even though everything is occurring in the United States. And the same with the health insurance company that's insuring those employees and keeping records on those employees. They have to be really careful about how they handle that data, even though none of this, not the insurance company, not the U.S. employer, not the employee doing the actual work, is anywhere other than within the United States. GDPR still applies because that's a citizen, and so it goes. The same with, let's say you have an American employee who is married to a citizen from Europe, then that spouse's information on the company insurance then becomes subject to this rule. So this is a very intense ruling that follows the citizens. So it says to companies, it doesn't matter where you reside, it doesn't matter what your rules are or where you did your incorporation or anything. What matters is what you are doing in regards to the citizen of Europe. So it's a matter of practicality. You almost have to make it the global standard because you're not, and no company can be sure, especially very large companies, who in their employee or their employers, employees' spouses, or even children. Okay, you've got some military families who've had children abroad, all right, who have dual citizenships. You see how complicated this can get, how fast. So it's just simply more practical to just make it a global standard.
And with that, I mean, we are seeing, if you will, a public backlash. People, I think the more aware that they become that there are these rules out there, the more they're going to say, yes, this is something I want for myself.
Right.
You do not have the right to just get whatever you can for the sake of getting whatever you can. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, and you're seeing that with Facebook. While a lot of professional people knew this was going on, the public did not. And largely the public thought when a company or social media or whomever took their data that it was basically name and address and age, basic stuff. They didn't realize that you could infer lots of intimate details about them. And so this has come into light in all these articles and testimonies and etc. And so the more the public learns, the more upset they become. And then when they learn other things like election manipulation and like personality manipulation in general, even though retail has been manipulating people in general to set a good environment to increase sales. And keep in mind that manipulation is not always a bad thing, but often it is. So once the public learns more about this, there is a backlash to that. And then once they learn that Europeans have more right to privacy than Americans, it's almost an insult to an American who thinks the typical American mindset is that we have lots of rights,
Well, that begs the question. It's from an American point of view, why has Europe taken the lead on privacy? Why haven't we done more? Why hasn't Congress done more? And from your perspective, do you think that Congress will, now that they're sensing, if you will, this popular uprising about privacy?
No, I don't. I don't think Congress will make a move at all, particularly because why should they when the GDPR becomes, in effect, a global standard? The issue's dealt with, more or less. Or they'll tend to see it that way. And so why take on business entities who, by the way, I don't mean to sound anti-business. I'm not. Data is exceptionally important to business, and it is very handy in customer service and the like. So you don't want to strangle that. If you strangle that, you kill the economy. So this is a very fine line to walk, okay, so that you respect privacy, but you also keep business going. So I don't mean any of this to sound anti-business. I'm just trying to discuss, what the landscape in general looks like. But if Congress were to act, that wouldn't necessarily be a good thing. That could be heaping more problems into it and stifling innovation. And I don't think they're going to find it necessary to do so with GDPR uh, stepping up in
Yeah,
the forefront.
but obviously over in Europe, I mean, we've already seen one gadfly, and I'll use that term, who has filed several complaints against companies like Google, like Facebook, et cetera, for not complying. That saying that you have to accept our terms, or else you can't get these benefits, et cetera. Is it only just a matter of time before we see a poster child, if you will, a large company or even a smaller one being hauled up on charges before the official EU regulators on this?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much a given. I think that may be happening to Facebook now. We'll see where that goes. Um, Maybe in the early processes of that, I'm not positive of that, but it looks that way. But there's probably going to be a poster child there somewhere. If it's not Google or Facebook, it'll be one of the major employers, I would think.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next point, that one of the ways that it has been suggested that you have to know where your data is being stored in order to comply with not only GDPR, but things like HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, Basel, et cetera. And for large companies, they have multiple locations, of course. How are they going to be able to track this most efficiently? They can say we're doing our best, but doing your best appears not to be good enough for the regulators now.
It's not, and it never was. Doing your best depends on a number of things. First of all, how you define your best, meaning what you're willing to do in terms of money and effort to achieve something, or what you're able to do. There are such things as budget constraints and the like. And willing to do is the will there, because everything you do cripples something else. So, for example, the little gadgets you put in cars, so insurance companies can see your driving habits. If anybody believes that's to decrease your insurance premium, they're sadly mistaken. It's not. It's to find reasons to increase it, or other ways to leverage the data to make money. So there's a clash of wills a lot of times in voluntary efforts. But even so, if you voluntarily want to do the right thing, or you're trying to comply with regulation, you have to know where your data is. And that doesn't mean just where you've stored it, by the way. So you can't just say, for example, I have my data stored in my own data center right here at my plant. It's right here. I know where it is. Yeah, but tell me, where are you keeping the copies of that data for recovery efforts? Where is that? I hope it's not at your plant, because if it gets flooded, you've lost it all. So, but do you know where else it's stored? And then, of course, just about everybody has data in the cloud and data in various cloud and application services, and so it's everywhere. So you have to have a means to discover that data, to know exactly what's in it, to know what information is personally identifiable and associated with whom. And so that requires much more granular intelligence on the data you own, where it is, and even if it's in multiple silos, so some data in that application, some in that one, some in this cloud, some in that cloud, some on premises, some wherever, you've got to be able to find it in a flash, and you've got to be able to know if and when it's ever moved, and where it went, and how it was used in order to be in compliance. So it is now not just a matter of business prudence to know where your information, your data is. It is now a matter of being able to stay in business, to be able to stay in compliance. I mean, I don't know too many companies that could stay in business after such substantial fines.
Absolutely, and it's not getting any easier in the sense that I'm a developer. I've come up with a great application. Let's say it's machine learning based, but it needs a database, and then you need to consider that as well. So it's not just what you have, it's where you're headed, what you're going to do as well.
Oh, yeah. Developers have to develop on the fly, and that means continuous delivery. That means continuous development. That means if I'm a developer, I'm throwing something into production as fast as I can constantly, okay? And I might spin up a database on Amazon, an AWS. I may spin up a database, I don't know, with Microsoft, or here, there, and yonder, okay? Google. Um, does my employer know I'm doing that? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, it's incredible. Some of these databases as a service, for example, I can spin up without a credit card. I don't have to pay for it till I finish the exercise, even. So the company can't even necessarily track that by credit card expenses until after the fact. Well, that's a little late. So yeah, it's there's a lot of liability, a lot of exposure to liability, I should say, that has to be dealt with in these privacy regulations. And keep in mind, GDPR is not the only huge privacy regulation we're going to have to deal with. There are e-privacy regulations coming down the pipe. The European Parliament approved that last fall. It's now under review at the Council of the EU. There are privacy regulations even coming behind that that would treat internet communications, web communications, the same as telecom communications, put them under telecom laws, which, if that passes, means that you can't keep a copy of any of that data, just like a telecom company can't keep a copy of your phone calls legally. So there you are.
You're a regular bluebird of happiness, I'm telling you.
I am. I'm so sorry. Truly,
but
I am usually an optimistic person, but you know.
You are laying out the real potential ramifications. And one of the things that we've talked about is the way that data discovery can help companies, big, small, medium size, really ameliorate, to make things better, to help find that data no matter where it exists. It's a wonderful idea.
It is.
But you say it comes with caveats.
Oh, yeah, but it blows my mind, okay? It just really blows my mind, because why would anybody wait for regulation to be able to find your own data? That's crazy. You know, to run a really profitable business, you need to know where your data is. So it just blows my mind that anybody wouldn't have been on top of data discovery to start with. However, there are those who have tried, and it's not an easy thing to do, you know. And there are caveats to it. For example, how you organize it matters, okay? Does this file belong under legal issues? Does it belong under compliance issues? Does it belong under customer information? Does it belong under all of them? Does that mean I need 3 copies? Or does that mean 3 different metadata tags? What does it mean, you know, to organize it? And so these issues have to be resolved. And then there are problems like with search. If I want to search my data to find the information I need, and I put in the word lemon, oh, well, what does that mean? That could be the color. It could be the fruit. It could mean a product that's faulty as soon as it was manufactured. It could mean a lot of things, okay? The word lit now, you know, young people say everything's lit and they mean great. Okay, well, if I put lit in there, what's that going to come back with? So it's not an easy or trivial thing to do. So again, I don't mean this as bashing corporations. It's a heck of an undertaking, you know, and there's a shortage of talent. And so what we need is more automated tools to help us do that.
Which obviously leads right into the next question about machine learning. Again, it can help make things easier, as you say, depending on how well it's trained. And that's a key factor.
It is. It's probably the factor. Machine learning, keep in mind, is designed to do a specific task. It doesn't adapt. Okay. We're working on that. If you want to learn more about trying to make machine learning or AI do lifelong learning and not forget what it learned to start with in order to learn the new task, then you might want to go to the DARPA website. Okay, there's a lot of information there on how people are working to resolve that issue. But specifically, machine learning is designed to do a specific task. Where its advantage is that it can recognize patterns that are too big for the human eye or the human brain to see or to recognize. Okay, and machine learning isn't learning really. What it's doing is solving a problem. Okay, so you send it out there to solve a problem. In order to do that, you have to train it on huge amounts of data, and it must be reliable data. So if I want to design machine learning, if I want to write a machine learning application to identify cats, then I have to provide that with enough data so that it can see cats of every kind and from every possible angle and doing every conceivable activity. So one might be on a fence, one might be in a cat bed in the house, one, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but it needs a massive amount of these pictures to figure out what a cat is. All right. And so from once it learns that though, then I can turn it loose on other data and say, go find the cat. And that's all it'll think about is finding the cats, finding the cats, finding the cats. So it's a process of elimination. This data is cat, this is not. This is not. This is not. That's how it works. Okay? And so what you're doing is you're teaching a machine to do what people do, but to do it better and faster. But that takes a little while. Okay? But it does make it way easier once it is trained and in force.
And just so in case you're joining us late, I can tell you that the woman you're hearing who knows far more than I do is Pam Baker, a good friend and an author of a number of articles and books. And this is an Io-Tahoe webinar, so thank you very much for joining us. The potential for machine learning. Now, you've outlined what's needed to get into it. And that it just doesn't spin up and go, okay, we're just going to find everything about everything. It needs to be trained first. But the potential for this, machine learning-driven data discovery, is it fair to say that the potential is enormous?
It is enormous. And it's here I get to be optimistic, okay? After sharing all the bad news with you. The good news,
as opposed to previously in this hour. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, because I'm normally an optimistic person, but I'm very much a realist too. Machine learning has huge potential, enormous potential. Okay, so when I mentioned earlier that it doesn't adapt well, it just focuses on a task, but it does it at huge scale and enormously fast. Let me explain it to you this way. If I had a Roomba vacuum or something like that, an automated little vacuum device running around the house, all right, and its design is to vacuum efficiently, all right, and so part of those parameters might be control energy costs. That might help its efficiency. So the machine learning that I put in this Roomba decides that if it operates at 2 a.m. in the morning, when the power company charges less for electricity, that would up its efficiency. It's done a good job. And so the thing turns itself on at 2 in the morning and commences to vacuum and sets off the motion detection on the home alarm. That makes a racket, wakes up everybody in the house. Does the Roomba care? No, it goes all honey badger on you. It doesn't care. It continues to vacuum because that was its mission. Be efficient, lower the energy cost. Okay, so we have some things.
Pam, let me just interrupt here. I'm not sure we're going to hear the term honey badger in too many different webinars on this or just about any other place. You want to define honey badger real quick?
Oh, honey badger is, lack of a better word, a meme. Describing an animal that just goes about its business without regard to anything else. or anybody else's consideration. And so the underlining statement of that meme is honey badger don't care. And that's not even a correct sentence, by the way, but such is the way of memes. So no matter what happens, it continues on its way. Okay. So that's the way machine learning is. It doesn't adapt well. It's really, really focused on its mission. But don't think of that as being dumb. For example, there's proof already it's smarter than many of us are. It can drive cars, for goodness sakes. That's how you get self-driving cars is machine learning. And a lot of advanced analytics and a lot of it piled together, but basically machine learning. So there's a lot of potential in it. And the better it's trained and the more it's exposed, and matures over time, getting back to lifelong learning and those things I was telling you to check out there for more information on that. So it's still maturing, it's still advancing, but already it's performing at astonishing levels, whether that is driving a car for us or fighting cancer better than any human doctor can. Okay? So again, once you aim it at a mission, it's just better at it than we are, even in these early days.
And to paraphrase something you had said earlier, it may actually find patterns. It may actually reveal insights into things that you and I hadn't even thought of asking.
Exactly. Now, remember when I said that machine learning doesn't adapt well yet? It's too immature to do that. We have to teach it. It is exceptional, though, at finding the patterns it's sent to find. All right? So what we're doing is designing machine learning to do a task, and then it goes out there and it learns and it gets better and better at doing that task. So if we set it on a task to identify cancer, and because we're humans, we're letting it know what patterns we've already seen and the tests we use now to identify cancer. And so the machine learning looks at that and looks at that and looks at that, and we're back to the value of training data, by the way. that data, people say it both ways, is essential for that. But once it finds that, then it'll go out and it'll say, hey, human, there were patterns that this cancer existed earlier than the patterns you told me about. So this patient has cancer, whether you can see it yet or not. Okay? That's enormously valuable information. So machine learning is already bringing us lots of advantages and benefits, and some of them we never thought to ask the machine. But that brings us back to another situation, and that is we don't exactly know, once we turn machine learning loose, how it came to the conclusions it comes to because of that. Okay? So it expands upon that mission to such a degree that we don't really know how it did it. We just know it came back with that response. And that's something else we're working on with machine learning, is to get it to tell us how it came to the conclusion that it did. But even so, like I said, when you look at what it is returning already, the future is just mind-boggling. I mean, the possibilities are just beyond anything we can comprehend at the moment.
So to start to wind things up a little bit here, we talked earlier in the introduction about moving from the information age to the knowledge era. That's something that you raised in our earlier discussion before we got on today. Could you go into exactly what you mean by that, and then we'll say how does machine learning, how does data discovery play a role in that?
Oh, sure. Up until now, we being as a society or as businesses have been focused on gathering information, okay? And we're doing that with IoT even. We want information from these devices. What are people doing on Netflix? How much electricity is this household using? Any number of things. It's just bits of information. Information is not the same as knowledge, okay? So if I'm using CRM, customer relationship management data, all right, and I know that this customer uh, orders men's shirts regularly, has for the last 20 years. So I assume that this customer is really into men's shirts, and I keep pitching her and pitching her and pitching her men's shirts, but suddenly she stops buying them, doesn't buy them at all anymore, and I'm like, why not? I have this information that says she always buys men's shirts. Well, that's because you have information, not knowledge. If you had knowledge, you would realize that she bought shirts for her husband, who has since passed away. So she's not ever going to buy any more men's shirts. Okay? So information and knowledge are two different things. And that's why you're seeing, for example, ads on social media that Google put there because they knew you were having a conversation in email or private messaging, and so they repeat that there. They think you're interested in it when really your conversation was about you had already bought that item, so you don't want to buy it again, and yet you've got ads on that same item over and over and over again. That's the problem with information instead of knowledge. Okay, so with the help of machine learning, we are moving and a realization, a new savviness in some business leaders where they have better vision as to the importance of knowledge over information, then we're seeing that evolve. And when that transformation takes place, then companies will prosper more, but everyday people will as well. Okay, uh, devices become more helpful, products become more suited to our actual needs, and pitched to us at the right time. Personalized medicine becomes truly personalized. Politics becomes better fact checked, okay, by machines instead of people, and so forth and so on. So knowledge is power. Information is just confusion, and I'll leave it there.
Absolutely. So, in that respect, let's start to, I guess, wind things down just a little bit. Let's talk about advice from your perspective. You're a company, you say, okay, I've got all this information out there. I need to be doing some data discovery, find out what I have, not only to comply with all the regulations that are out there, be it HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, GDPR, et cetera, but also to get a better handle on what I have and how I can put it to more effective use. Would you be telling people, should they be putting that proverbial toe in the water right now?
I would say jump right in. You don't have time to stick your toe in it. The market's changing too fast. You're going to have to learn as you go. I'm sorry if that's uncomfortable. Okay, the ship is sinking. Jump already. If you got to learn to swim on the fly, then that's what you got to do. But yes, things are moving so quickly. Machine learning is maturing so fast that everybody will be using it to do everything. And there will be machine learning wars. So, for example, there may be machine learning that a company is using to manipulate a consumer base or an election, but like we saw Cambridge Analytics accused of, okay? But then there could be machine learning on the consumer side that's designed to combat that instantly in real time, for example. And in the middle of that is somebody trying to sell yard signs for an election. Okay, I mean, it gets that granular. Everybody will be affected by it, even the small company trying to make yard signs. So now is not the time to sit back. It's new, but it is fast, and it's taken over the market landscape. And you must know, you must have that knowledge, not only of the information that you possess and how you might can use it, but what other information is available external to you that would increase your knowledge in operating in a particular market scape, and go from there. So you've got to go ahead and get on board. You've got to go ahead and jump. The time to wait and see has passed.
That ship has sailed, is what I hear you saying. But
Oh,
on
yeah.
the other hand, it comes back down, I would almost think, to the nature of people. Ultimately, it's going to be people who utilize the knowledge gained from a machine learning environment, from data discovery. And as you have pointed out just now, that data can be used for good purposes or not so good purposes.
Yeah, it's a tool. That's all it is, okay? And so people who are afraid that machine learning is going to take their job shouldn't be for that very reason. Let's go back to the simple example of the Roomba, okay? It does not care that it set off the motion detector on the house alarm. The thing is blaring. It woke everybody and the family dog up and made chaos everywhere and summoned the cops. Who wanted to talk to the cops at 2 in the morning? Not me, not you, not anybody, okay? The Roomba doesn't care. The Roomba is on a mission to vacuum efficiently and to constantly increase that efficiency. And so you need a human in there to make those sort of decisions because, yes, they do matter, okay? And so machine learning is not going to replace you. It's going to be your assistant. But without it, you're going to be working blind, and you're going to be out of business pretty soon. Your privacy will be impacted pretty soon. You know, if there's not machine learning in your defense, every job, everywhere, every concern, everywhere will eventually be protected, defended, built up, torn down by machine learning assistants.
And for those companies that can, for those companies that can incorporate machine learning into data discovery, which I think as we've pretty well outlined here in this last discussion, it's a gotta have for companies. That gives them an advantage that without, they run the real risk of A, falling behind, and number two, having the regulators knock on their door say, we need to talk.
It's critical. Your data is too big for you to do it any other way. So you have to use machine learning to do that. Just understand it's not going to be fully functional immediately. It does have to learn over time. Okay, so go into it with realistic expectations, but understand that data is too large to do it any other way. To truly discover what's in that data and whether or not you're in compliance and whether or not this information can be used elsewhere, and if so, how. You have to have machine learning to do that. It's simply too big. I don't care if you had 1,000 years and a workforce of 50,000 people. It's too big. There's more data flowing in every minute. You can't catch up, much less keep up. So machine learning for data discovery is an absolute must.
And on that note, I'm going to say, if you have any questions, any comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can hit us on Twitter at Io-Tahoe. You can hit Pam personally at BakerCom1 or me over at MMICom and use the hashtag data discovery. Pam, I want to thank you. This has been fascinating. It's always a joy just to sit and have a good discussion with you, and I'm glad we were able to share it here.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I always do. So we'll have to talk again sometime.
Sounds good. And on that note, on behalf of Io-Tahoe, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us. I'm Steve Friedberg, and I hope you have a good day. Stay well.